Good afternoon, class. I am Malaki and I will going to discuss one of the Philippine literature during the Spanish period, which is the Katapusang Hibik ng Pilipinas, a poem that written by Andres Bonifacio. I hope that you already read the poem on our handouts. So, this is the content of our discussion for today. First is about the author, second is the summary, third is the literary analysis, then lastly the themes, lessons, and the universal truth. But first, let's talk about Andres Bonifacio. Here is a graphic organizer about the key facts and information about Andres Bonifacio. First, his life and education. He born in November 30, 1863, which is what we always celebrate as Bonifacio Day. He is the eldest son. He grew up in Tondo, Manila, and dropped out of school when his parents died that forced him to support his family. Then, when it comes to his work, he worked as a messenger and warehouse keeper that lead him to learn Tagalog, English, and Spanish language. And when it comes to his political activism, he was a member of Liga Filipina that organized by Jose Rizal, and he was also a self-educated man because even if he stopped schooling, he still used to read different books like Noli Me Tangere, El Filibusterismo, Buhay ng mga Pangulo ng Estados Unidos, and so on. So these books are also influenced in shaping and conduct of Bonifacio. Then when it comes to his connection to the Katipunan, he was a founder of Katipunan, which founded in 1892, and he has a strong friendship with Emilio Jacinto, who is known as the brain of Katipunan. And when it comes to his marriages, he married twice. First wife, Monica, who died, and the second wife is Gregoria de Jesus, where they had a son which died because of smallpox when it was infant. And lastly, his death. So he was captured and accused of treason against Aguinaldo's government and found guilty because even Bonifacio, he didn't defend herself because Bonifacio refused to fight against fellow Tagalogs. That's why he accepted to be executed at the mountains of Maragondon. So that's all for his life. Now let's proceed to the summary of the poem. The central idea of the poem is all about how Tagalogs live in a great abundance and prosperity that they experienced during the Spanish period. Refer Spain as the mother country. You may be thinking, why is it mother country? Okay, a little history. During the time, there's a lot of country that interested to conquer the Philippines. But when the Spaniards came and offered them a friendship to the Tagalogs, together with the promise of guiding them towards a better life and a higher stage of knowledge, then the Tagalogs were persuaded by these deceitful words. That's why Andres Bonifacio compared Spain to a mother that neglects her children because it was showed in 1 to 3 stanzas, which the Tagalogs already opened their senses that their mother country was just abandoned and not treating them as what it promised. Instead, according to Persona, they used the Filipinos for over 300 years of conquering the Philippines and experienced brutal treatment that showed in the 4 to 6 stanzas, which we will imagine the faces and bodies of the Filipinos and how merciless the Spaniards. And when it comes in cheating, it shows in 8 and 9 stanzas where they pay for alumbrado. I'm not sure what alumbrado means, but based on my research, it is a practitioners or followers of a religious mysticism that believed in spiritual mystery. And also, Filipino pay taxes for the Spanish friars. And the last remaining stanzas, it is about a warning to the Spain that the end of its cruelty to the Philippines is nearing. It looks like Andres Bonifacio is calling for a revolution just to stop the Spaniards and let the Filipinos, free from their hands. That's all for the summary. And now let's analyze the literary piece using or by determining the elements of the poem. First is the persona. The persona is a first-person point of view because Andres Bonifacio uses the words "are" and "we." Then second, the mood and atmosphere. In the poem, it shows sorrow, pain, and anger of the Tagalogs to Spaniards. And then lastly, when it comes to the meter or measurement, the poem has 14 stanzas with 12 syllables and 4 lines in each stanza. And now, let's proceed to the theme and subject matter of the poem. Katapusang Hibik ng Pilipinas incorporates numbers of themes. First is the way of life or life, which on the Filipinos or Tagalogs are forced to work and pay taxes for Spaniards. And then it also involved their experiences, like what written in the poem in 4 to 6 stanzas, where the Filipinos are being tortured, killed, poisoned, and abused. Even if Filipinos do what Spain wants, Filipinos still treat badly. So it's written in the 10 stanzas. And lastly, the merciless actions of Spain over Filipinos, because aside from killing the Filipinos, they also let Filipinos to strive to death, where Spain didn't even care if that Filipinos are going to die. That's why Katapusang Hibik ng Pilipinas is actually a very sad poem consisting of the climactic moment of the history of the Tagalog poetry during the 19th century. So now, let's take a look to the imagery in the poem. Imagery is a writing that uses vivid description that appeals to a reader's sense to create an image or idea in their head. So, we have here an original and English version of imagery that I saw in the poem of Katapusang Hibik ng Pilipinas. In the first lines, so we will see a Filipinos that being treated like an animal through the way the narrator described the torturing, kicking, and so on. Then in number 2, here the narrator has a vivid description in throwing the Filipinos to the sea to be shot by the gun and poisoned. Then in number 3, the narrator showed the vivid description about how looks like the dead body of a Filipino, where the bones and the flesh are broken and smashed because of too much working for Spaniards. Then in number 4, we have here a vivid description of a very beautiful environment like written in the poem. The land, the house, farms, and fields that proves that our country before is very rich in human resources. Then in number 5, we have here the vivid description of explosion of guns and cannons. Then lastly, number 6, it shows the vivid description of a war where there's a blood that actually flow in their bullets. So that's all for our imagery. Now let's proceed to the literary devices that used in the poem that help the readers to create a more image of what is happening within the writing. We have 4 literary devices from the poem. First is the hyperbole, which refers to any sort of exaggerated description or statement. Then second is the simile, which defines as an indirect comparison that relies on the word like or as. Then third is the oxymoron, which defined as a self-contradicting word or group of words. And lastly, the anaphora, which is a repetition of words or phrase at the beginning of several clauses that have different ending. Like here in the poem, the word paalam or farewell in last stanzas are repeated. That's all for our literary devices. Let's now proceed to the symbolism and its meaning in the poem. Mother is used to refer to Spain, particularly in its rule and position in the Philippines. Then second is the child. Child is used to refer to a Filipinos who neglects by his mother, which is the Spain. And lastly is the word paalam or farewell, is a warning to us Spaniards that the rise of revolutionary action of Filipinos are coming. So that's all for the symbolism. Let's now proceed to the society, family, and or cultural issues in the poem. Most of the people easily believe in these two words. The issue is the Filipinos. Because of easily believing in the words and letting the Spain lead our country, that's why it becomes easy for Spain to colonize the Philippines. The Philippine history in the poem itself proved that Filipinos before easily trust the Spaniards, thinking that Spaniards will lead the Filipinos to the path of knowledge, that actually they deceived the Filipino and brought the Filipinos to false belief. Then, the expression of storms and stress. First is the greediness and power and own interest of the Spain in our resources and to the Filipino people. Second is the cruelty and merciless actions of Spain to Filipinos. And lastly, the lack of confidence of Filipinos. Because as you can see, 300 years is too long. Filipinos are abused for that long, but no Filipinos was tried to stand out and fight against Spaniards. And lastly, the theme of the Katapusang Hibik ng Pilipinas. It incorporates the themes of the anti-colonial and nationalistic because as you can see in the poem, the persona describing those abusive treatment of Spain in order to stop the colonialism and to open the senses of the Tagalogs that they can come together and can be successful through their own means without the help of Spaniards. The persona showed the nationalistic characteristic by being the voice of the Filipinas. That's all, and now let's proceed to the lessons in the poem of Katapusang Hibik ng Pilipinas. Actually, these lessons should not be discussed so much because it's obvious already that as a Filipino citizen, it is our responsibility to defend our country, to have care to our country, and love our country because this land gives us a place to live, a place to expand our knowledge, and gives us a great platform to represent ourselves. What might happen in our country can affect our life and the future generation. That's all for our lessons, and now let's proceed to the universal truth. Our first universal truth is from John F. Kennedy. Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask yourself what you can do for your country. Because I observe in our society today that most of us relaying the problems or our problems in the government or in our country without asking ourselves if we already have done for our country. Because even if we are a student, we can help our country to get success by simply studying hard. Because through that, we are not wasting our country's effort and money for free tuition. And of course, from Ronald Reagan, if we love our country, we should also love our countrymen. Like in the poem, the narrator showed care and love to our fellow Filipino by the means of declaring a revolution against Spaniards just to end and let the Filipinos free from the oppressors. So comparing in our present day, we should also love our countrymen by just helping and each other. Like here in our block, we can help each other to survive this semester by having a unity through sharing ideas, knowledge, and thoughts so we can spread positivity and success. So that's all for our universal truth. And now let's proceed now to the performance task. Your performance task is to make a mind map that summarizes the key major points of our topic today, which is the Katapusang Hibik ng Pilipinas. Use your own words. You may use Canva or any apps or technologies that will help you to create a mind map. This is our mind map rubrics criteria. Just make sure to read this before you create your mind map. That's all. Thank you for listening. I hope you learned something from me. If you have questions, additions, or clarifications, just open your mic.